Good day, everybody, and welcome to Closing the Digital Divide. Today we have with us Brooke Coleman, who is the Senior Manager of Business Development Team for the Compliance and Regulatory line of business at Widelity. Boy, that is a mouthful, Brooke. Thank you and welcome to the show.
You're welcome.
Now, Widelity is a leading provider of compliance and government funding consulting. And Brooke, and as I was reading through this, Brooke, I was like, wow, I finally found someone who is busier than I am. So she manages research and outreach for business development opportunities for the compliance and regulatory team. She manages social media, content, and marketing materials. She builds partnerships in the industry, interact with leaders, opportunities and clients, draft project proposals, and complete sales. Brooke, when do you sleep?
For about 4 or 5 hours here and there,
Well, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. One of the first questions that I always ask people, and Brooke, I get different answers sometimes depending on where I am and who I'm talking to. What is the digital divide and why is it so important that we all help to close this gap?
Sure. Well, thank you, Charles, for having me on. I'm really excited to be here and talk about this really important topic today. So to me, the digital divide is simply, the inequity between both access and the utilization of the internet. There's a variety of access speeds based on location. There's a variety of, devices that are used in the home. So yes, it's speed, but it's also the usage of the internet. And there's just a difference across the board. And so, where you are born or where you live largely determines your level of broadband access. And it can have a significant, influence and implications into somebody's future. So you looked at my LinkedIn. I was a teacher at heart. I went through the Teach for America program. And so, built into my soul is education. So a lot of the things I talk about are around education, but with Teach for America, the whole mission is that no matter where you are born or what zip code you're born in, you deserve to have access to a high quality education. And I strongly believe in that mission. Obviously, I'm in the telecommunications industry now, but it's the same mission with the digital divide. It's no matter where you are born or where you live, you should still have access to high-speed internet service. This is why it's so important. And, we learned this through COVID. I know COVID is over, and we don't wear masks out anymore, but we learned so much, and sometimes people are quick to forget. But let's not forget what happened the last 2 years of COVID, that, the digital divide and broadband access is so important for education. But it's not, when you hear that, it's not just education for kids. It's education for adults too. A working mom or a working dad can get their master's degree or their bachelor's degree or even their doctorate degree at home if they have the proper access in order to attend online school at night. So, people say education, but it's not just for kids. And then additionally, I have a stepson who's 14 and he does virtual school. He started doing virtual school because of COVID, but he's loved it so much that he's continued to do so. This wouldn't have been a thing 5 years ago. Everyone went to school in person. There was no other option. But because of COVID and because I'm lucky enough to live in a place where I have good internet, he can attend school. I work from home. My husband works from home. He's upstairs doing school right now. So, we because we have access, but not everyone has the same access that we do. And, that's the digital divide right there. Having the education, the work from home opportunities, the telehealth, the IoT devices. Yes, it's cool to have a smart home and all of these IoT devices, but there's also a safety piece to it. Thinking about the elderly, and some elderly folks can stay in their homes longer if they have more safer home with some. Maybe they're connected to some IoT devices that they can do telehealth, and then they'll alert somebody to help if they fall. And then it's also the quality of life. I think from COVID, we learned the importance of being connected to the outside world. And then bringing back to IoT devices, my grandmother was in her 90s and she was up in Ohio and I'm down here in Nashville. So I didn't get to see her that often. She didn't get to see my kids that often, but we had a digital picture frame. And so because she had okay Wi-Fi at the nursing home. It wasn't great, but it was good enough for a digital picture frame. I was able to update on my phone an app that updated pictures so she could see my kids grow up and she could be in the nursing home and
Wow,
see those
that's awesome.
pictures. So, it's yes, it's just, it's just the internet, but it has so grandiose, implications of the
Mhm.
benefits of it in, all different aspects of our lives.
And I will comment on that in that, I got in this business back in 2016. So I had heard a story, and I lived in rural areas all my life, but I had heard a story about a young girl, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it kind of motivated me. I heard a story of a young girl teenager, who was coming home late from a school event, ran off the road, hit a tree, had no cellular service
Yeah.
in order to call for help. And unfortunately, she didn't make it. And when I heard that story, it touched, because I raised six
Oh my
girls.
goodness.
So I couldn't imagine, what those folks felt like, not having the ability to reach out and test that. So
Yeah.
great stuff. Great response to that question, Brooke. So from your position at Widelity, what is Widelity's main role, would you say, in helping to close the digital divide?
Yeah, so I talked about the digital divide is an issue of access with speed and then as well as devices. But I think right now the where we're at as a country as a whole, not every single area, but as a country as a whole, we need to focus on access. We need to focus on getting people up to speed and getting them the high speed service so that they can even have a device to use, right? So at Widelity, we assist internet service providers with applying to these government grant programs in order to build out that infrastructure that's needed in order to increase that access. So we work with tier 2, tier 3 small providers who may not have experience with applying to government programs before. This is, just a massive influx of dollars into the industry. And so we help those internet service providers who don't have experience apply. Also, we work with clients who have past experience and are traumatized, and they know the amount of work that is involved, and they need help. They don't have the staff to be able to apply to these programs, and they want a trusted expert in order to do that. And that's where Widelity comes in. I think one of the challenges with government programs and small businesses is that a provider, has to pay for labor and costs up front, and then they get reimbursed those costs 30, 60 days later before they receive their funds. So they have to float
Mm-hmm.
that cash, sometimes for a significant amount of time. And if they're not doing the paperwork right, then it just delays the funds getting back to them. So that's sort of our mission. Yes, we help clients apply to programs, but then we also help them stay compliant and actually receive their reimbursements to pay their bills. So we specialize in all of that paperwork kind of involved there.
So as a part of that, um, it sounds like you guys really help on the front end, because there's a lot of work. I spent 16 years at a federal agency, and the bureaucracy is enormous,
Mhm.
especially when applying for funding. Talk to me a little bit about how you guys help them to prepare.
Yeah, so I have a lot of initial meetings with clients just to talk about the program rules, just to make sure first that they qualify, that they're eligible, that they're looking in the right areas. So that's sort of
Mm-hmm.
in the precursor stage of just, let's get you a good plan, because the better prepared and the better plan a client has, the more successful that they're going to be. So, in order to prepare, obviously it's make a plan. So where do you go? What do you want to build? What sort of area do you want to reach? What is your mission? Figure out what those goals
Mm-hmm.
are. Are you simply expanding your network, or are you building something new? Start gathering data, make data informed decisions, looking at the maps and all of the information and resources that are out there. So we sort of help guide the client through, what needs to be done in order to get prepared. Some additional things for getting prepared are making sure
Mm-hmm.
financials are in place. So a lot of these programs now are requesting audited financials. Some of them are saying reviewed financials are okay. but you will have to eventually get audited financials, shall you win an award. So, it's just something to keep in mind. Applicants should be GAAP compliant. It's a certain term. Talk to your CPA about it if you don't know what it means. You'll need a letter of credit, potentially, depending on the program. You'll need matching funds. So figuring out solutions for that. And one of the big things that's coming up lately is making sure you're compliant with the FCC as well as the state that you're applying to. So being compliant with the FCC typically means that you've submitted your FCC BDC, the broadband data collection form, on time, and you're submitting your data, truthfully and honestly, and you're compliant from the FCC standpoint. And then making sure if there's any compliance things with the state. Some states have required internet service providers to provide that data to the state so they can make a state map. So just be sure that you're aware of what the compliance, challenges might be, and make sure that you check those boxes. Additionally, to prepare, I'd say to build up community support, you're going to need letters of community support in order to apply to these programs. And build your team. You're going to want good partners in your team, whether it be vendors, whether it be staff, whether it be community anchor institutions, build up your team so that you can really put forth a strong application, especially if you're a tier 2 or a tier 3 provider competing with a tier 1 and you're worried about that. Look at the scoring guide for the program that you're applying to. See where you can maximize your points. Where do you bring in strengths that others do not? And then for BEAD specifically, you're going to need a cybersecurity plan. That is something that you'll need to start planning now. You'll also need to consider environmental challenges, do any sort of NEPA requirements, and then create a climate resilient plan and build a network that is resilient to climate change. That's one of the components of the BEAD program. So there's a lot of different things in order to prepare. And we sort of try to coach our clients through that process of like, okay, do this, do that. Get these things together, get your ducks in a row, and then we take all of it together, write narratives, enter data into the portal, and help them submit.
Wow, that's my head's spinning already.
I'm sorry. Yes.
How does one decide what program to go after? What program fits? Is it area? Is it size of company? Is it the partnership? It's where you're trying to build. What actually leads an entity to say, "Hey, I want to go after this funding"?
Yeah, so I think part of it is, what is your business? Are you an internet service provider? Are you a for-profit company, a nonprofit company? Are you an ILEC? Are you a CLEC? Are you an electric co-op? So that kind of can play a factor into it. We're seeing more and more through the Capital Projects Fund and through the BEAD Fund that most of these programs are open up to all of those entities that I just listed. So it's beginning to grow in the sense of opening up to the entire industry of, if you're a provider, then you're most likely going to be eligible. So step one is, figuring out if you're an eligible entity. Are you compliant with all of those things that I just said, the FCC and compliant within your state? That's gonna be important. And then your location. Where are you? Are you in an urban area that is marked as served or unserved, or are you in a rural area that's unserved and underserved? What's your population? If you're an area that's rural and unserved, and when I say rural, I mean less than 20,000 people, then you can qualify for a lot of the USDA type programs. But if you are not that rural, then you won't qualify for those. You'll probably want to look more towards your state programs. All the 50 states are slowly rolling out their capital projects fund programs. And then in the near future, all of the states will be rolling out their BEAD programs. So location matters. The FCC broadband data fabric map, that's going to matter. Looking at that map and finding areas that are anything below 100 over 20 are likely going to be eligible for grant funding. They've sort of become a universal definition of unserved and underserved is the 25 over 3 and then the 100 over 20. So those are sort of your two buckets of areas to look at for funding.
So I get that as an ISP, but as an ISP, they're or CSP, whichever they decide to call themselves, they're going to be working with a municipality or a
Hmm.
town or a county. How does that work? Or do you guys also help those entities to work with the ISPs?
So we can. Our business is typically generated around the private industry and helping the private industry access funds, but we can sort of facilitate that relationship if it needs to be. Public-private partnerships, I think, was a big
Mm-hmm.
like the word of the year last year. So
Right.
it's definitely going to help in an application if you can create a public-private partnership with a community. Uh, and it also depends on the state that you're in. So different states like Florida and Virginia and Massachusetts, they highly encourage municipalities to be sort of the lead applicant, and that's where they, want the money to flow from.
Mm-hmm.
Other states are more open to the private industry and more open to just giving the funds to an internet service provider who maybe has a letter of support from that county or that community. So there's sort of different tiers and levels of a public-private partnership. It could be simply a letter of support, or it could be a 50-50 cost share, or a variety of different things. But there's different levels of a
Mm-hmm.
public-private partnership that could be involved.
So you mentioned something that I wasn't really planning on going in this direction, and you can change my mind if you want, but you did mention mapping
Yes.
and how that affects everything that we do, all the funding, building, everything that we do. Where does Widelity stand on where we are in the official mapping at this point?
So, I mean, the maps are what they are. The FCC is doing what they can. I think they have
Mm-hmm.
a big challenge to try to get every single location and to get accurate data. I think it's going to be a process, like anything with the government is. So there is data that's currently out there. There is a challenge process. So if the data isn't right, we need to challenge it. We need to make these
Mm-hmm.
maps the way that they should be. I think that I was at the BEAD Summit Success Conference last week, and the NTIA is very firm on their June 30th deadline. They are going to make the BEAD allocations on June 30th, stating, that all the states and what their allocation is going to be based on the FCC map at that time. So, it it could be 10 years before we get to a really good FCC broadband map. It's just an
Mm-hmm.
iterative process of challenging the data and making, working together as an industry in order to make this really, useful tool. But we don't have 10 years to wait. So at some point,
Right.
someone's got to draw a line in the sand and say enough is enough. We got what we got, and let's go with it. And so I think that's what the NTIA is doing. And on June 30th, they'll make the allocations based on the data we have at the time, and we'll just do our best.
So it's going to be pretty important for the entities out there to try and get those challenges in, especially in rural areas where there's let's just face it, the digital divide is wider in rural areas than it is in urban areas. Although
Hmm.
it is prevalent in both cases, but I think in
It
rural
is.
areas it's more of a it's more magnified. We tend to see it more in rural
Well, you
areas.
can see it on the map, right? You can see it on the map a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot easier. And the map in downtown Houston, I was working with a client in Houston, and you zoom into down, everyone appears to be served, but he lives there and he knows he doesn't have access, but
Right.
it's not shown there on the map. And then how do you challenge that? How do you go up against AT&T and say, no, you don't actually provide me service? And so that's a big challenge. And I think the challenge process through the FCC is good, and people should still be out there giving challenges. But I think the deadline is, as far as right now, is I think the window's closed, but it is going to be an ongoing process. So, these maps need to be revised before grants are going to be made at the states.
Mm-hmm.
The states need to be working on their state maps, and I know they are, in order to apply their BEAD funds, accordingly, so that the money is well spent. It's $42 billion, but it's only $42 billion. It's going to go
Right.
fast. And at the conference, the BEAD conference, the NTIA said the whole mission, and they are committed to this mission, that internet is for all. And they really do mean all, that every American will be brought up to speed to 100 over 20, across the nation. And so that's a very lofty goal for only $42 billion. So I'm excited to see what will happen. It will be a very bumpy road. I know there will be lots of
Sure.
challenges along the way, but it will be a very exciting time to see some closure in the digital divide.
Well, and I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. I was recently reading articles that was done by Blair Levine, who's a former attorney at the FCC, and one of the two things really caught my attention. One was he said, I'm going to pull this up so I don't misquote. And I know this is part of a broader conversation, but I think it's pertinent here because of the conversation we're having here now. And he said that America has an unfortunate track record of public projects taking longer and being more expensive than in other countries. And as I read through some of the things that you guys are doing in helping prepare, do you feel like that would would help to mitigate some of these projects that are taking longer to do and costing more money?
Yeah, I think that's, the standard American problem. It definitely rings true to all of our history and the things that we've tried to do in the past. But I think moving forward, it's preparation. Preparation is that key to success. If you have a good design, if you have a good plan, you have a solid budget, and you have a timeline, you got to stick to that timeline. I think there's going to be a lot of challenges with supply chain. Um, Things are not going to go unscheduled, and there's weather delays. It happens, but you need to plan for the worst case scenario. There are compliance challenges if you don't meet your timelines, you don't meet your deadlines, you don't meet your speed requirements that you say that you're going to provide to your residents. They If you don't meet what you agree to in that grant agreement, funds could be clawed back. You could be fined. You may have to ask for an extension, which happens, but they're only going to give you so long to do your project. So it's just
Right.
important to sort of plan. If you plan for those contingencies, you plan for worst case scenarios. You get the trusted partners in your corner to be able to help you execute. You have good project managers. The workforce is another thing that's going to be a major challenge of having the right workforce, and that can cause timeline delays. So just
Mm-hmm.
thinking about all of the different factors before you apply, including them in your application so that you address them upfront and have a plan for them, I think would help mitigate some of that risk.
As a follow-up question to that, the president recently came out with the Buy America Act.
Hmm.
How is that going to impact these projects? You already talked about supply chain.
Yeah.
Um, it's going to be pretty tough to do.
It's going to be a huge challenge for this industry. So, at the conference I was at last week, the NTIA said that they are working on some additional guidance for the BABA rules as it applies to BEAD. They're also working on potential waivers. So the fiber is built here in the U.S. We have Corning and CommScope that build the fiber. So it was my interpretation that you will have to buy American fiber, but the electronics are not made here. So what do we do? Well, they're interviewing and talking to a variety of vendors and trying to understand the industry, understand where do you get all your products from, what can be made here in the US, what has to happen offshore, what can we do to sort of problem solve and meet the Buy American requirements, and what things can't meet those Buy American requirements. So they did say that there would be potentially that there would be a specific waiver for anything that is made offshore that cannot be made here in the United States. So they understand the BABA challenges. They understand they need to be flexible.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very encouraging to hear, that they do get it. They do understand. They are working on guidance. They are working on potential waivers. And with the supply chain point, they're considering, I have to be very careful with the words I use. They're considering a waiver for time. So let's say, something is a year or a year and a half out before you can actually get it. we don't have time to wait for that. You have to have your build done by 2028. You don't have a year and a half to wait for one piece of equipment in order for the build to move on. So they are considering a time specific or time sensitive type waiver if there are supply chain issues.
Okay, and the last thing, and we're quickly running out of time. This has been extremely educational and informative. ACP program.
Yeah.
It has not been refunded as of yet. What is the impact from your perspective of not funding that ACP program going to have on closing the digital divide?
I think it's astronomical. You spend all of this time getting these families signed up. They're getting this discount on their bill. They're finally feeling encouraged that they can connect to the internet and that they can afford it. And then you pull it away. You also have all of these providers who have registered and done all of the paperwork. It is not easy to get involved in this program. So, they went through all the hurdles, they went through all the hoops in order to provide this discount to their customers. And then you pull it away from them and they don't have an option to give a low cost option to their residents. Their residents aren't going to be happy. They're going to, unsubscribe and say, I can't afford this anymore. It's just going to further to the digital divide tenfold, 100-fold. I mean, it would be awful. I know that the ACP program, they say, is a bipartisan issue, but like you said, it's not in any budget anywhere. It's not in any legislation yet. But it will run out. Anyone who wins a capital project fund money from the Department of Treasury, so the state programs that are happening right now, are required to participate in that program. So you're going to have a major uptake in all of these providers and these residents, participating in this program. It's going to run out very quickly. I think someone estimated early next year, and there is no route to refund that right now. So it would be catastrophic if it doesn't get refunded. So any lobbyists listening, that would definitely be a program that definitely needs to be refunded.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get this out to some decision-making ears, and we can get that on someone's agenda here very soon. Brooke, this has been great. I so appreciate you coming on. You have so much information. Tell our audience, if they want to use your services, how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, simply just send us an email. You can email me personally, brooke.coleman@widelity.com. We have I think a generic email account, compliance.info@Widelity account. You'll get my whole team. So yeah, just reach out, email us. I'm on LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn. Reach out to me via LinkedIn. Happy to connect, even just to share stories, share insights, share education. Happy just to talk.
That is awesome. Well, Brooke, again, appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This has been awesome. I look forward to many more chats with you to help me get educated. And
would be happy to. Thank you for having me, Charles.
You're welcome. And you guys have a great day. We'll talk to you soon.